is a bit earlier than has been posted on the banner. This is 7 minutes to 10 in the morning in local time in London, or 9:53 hours GMT on Friday, the 7th of May 2021. So this is the Fleet Street collection. And the Daily Mail is being echoed by the Daily Mirror, which is supposed to be not part of the same corrupt cabal that backs the corrupt cabal of Boris Johnson. And the Financial Times has got a picture, and the headline is "Fishing Lines, French Boats in Jersey Protests." And these are the pictures, but these same pictures, similar pictures, being carried by the alt-right stupid morons at the Daily Express. Which is running the so-called thought for the day. Tough day, at least you are not Keir Starmer. Unless you are Keir Starmer. In which case, tough day. And here is the Daily Star, so-called Fleet Street, having a go at the French with the kind of rerun of the sitcom based on the so-called Second World War. And it says, good morning. This is the kind of difficulty ascribed to the French character who played this hello kind of part, and he couldn't say morning, he could say good morning. And they're saying that the French are mourning because they've been beaten by Boris Johnson. That is the stupidest stunt. And the Times idiotically continues the theme of the idiocy by running this item without any quotation marks around the words peace talks. Now, that peace talks is printed by the Times as if there has been a war. Well, it's mainly to do with the French territory. Jersey is not British. We shall come to that later. And there is a piece about Americans won't oppose the British debt deal with Iran to free Nazanin from the Iranian detention. Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe. And another piece on page 3 about Gary Lineker being targeted by the UK tax collection authorities for £5 million. Now, looking at these figures these people are allowed to owe, it becomes very clear that there is no longer even a pretense that there is no such thing as society. They do whatever they like, and they only persecute the poorest, the most vulnerable, and the most deprived, and the most denied when it comes to bills. including rent, arrears, and so on. And it says that there are pages and pages of misleading, bragging and boasting that the pandemic has ended. And just on the theme of the very rich and wealthy, there is a piece about India, and it's under the banner of news, coronavirus world news. And the heading is Wealthy Asians Fly Overseas on Vaccine Tours. And it is written by somebody that is described as Richard Lloyd Perry, Asia editor. Now that is something new. Hardly come across that. And India is shown on the world update on the global cases on pandemic. Most new cases in India, that is an understatement because the Indian government is suppressing, Narendra Modi is suppressing the numbers all over the place, and the others in India are also suppressing and downplaying the numbers. Even so, let's say that there is 500,000 new cases of infection in India. And proportionately, Brazil has got 77,359. America has got 44,834. Turkey has 26,476. And Argentina has got 26,238. Countries reporting most deaths. America death number, as stated here, is 572,987, and Brazil has 411,588, and India 230,168, Mexico 217,740, and the United Kingdom 127,583,000. And deaths per million population rank. Hungary now 2,929, and on January 31, 1,296. Czech Republic 2,757. Bosnia and Herzegovina 2,663. Montenegro 2,415. Bulgaria similar. North Macedonia similar. Slovenia similar. Slovakia similar. Belgium similar. Italy similar. Brazil 1,936. Peru 1,901. United Kingdom 1,879, and Poland 1,823. Daily record of 412,000 cases in India. A record 412,000 COVID-19 cases were confirmed in 24 hours yesterday, along with nearly 4,000 deaths as India's devastating second wave continued to surge. Total infections have now passed 21 million, with a total death toll of 230,168, according to the Health Ministry. But that is an understatement, as even Indian newspapers are admitting. And there is a plan. This is a piece from Brussels by Bruno Waterfield. Plan B to sniff out developing world's infected. They're going to use bees as inspectors of the virus infections in the poorer countries. There's a piece in the Times on page 15 that the British Psychological Society has expelled its president-elect, for alleged bullying after he raised concerns about its governance. Now that is typical, isn't it? And Nick Sick Clegg allegedly was given the kind of lead role by Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook on handling Trump's Facebook ban. Now, if the ban is lifted, it will, of course, be with the continuing complicity by Sick Clegg. Now, this is the one that we are continuing to campaign about. This young person, Myra Zulfikar, who was murdered on Monday in Lahore in Pakistan. She told police she was at risk and she wasn't saved. What does it remind of? Police failing to save a woman who told them she was at risk, and then soon after she was murdered. What has Imran Khan to say about that? We shall ask Imran Khan directly later. We shall put communications to Imran Khan about that. And the British policeman who killed an ex-striker, footballer, was calm as he stomped on striker's head. Murder trial told. And a 16-year-old boy in Britain has been charged with killing his father because his father defended a homeless man. Now, look at the kind of upside down attitudes. The young person should have been more sympathetic to the homeless person. Not only was he not sympathetic, he murdered his father for being sympathetic to the homeless person. Remember what I said earlier, there is no society. Because if there was society, then the child, 16-year-old, would have had societal regard for the rights and well-being and welfare of the homeless person. A 16-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of a father who was stabbed when he tried to protect a homeless man from a group of youths. The teenager is to appear in Chelmsford Magistrates Court today. James Gibbons, 34, who had 4 children, was holding a barbecue with friends and relatives to celebrate his twin daughter's 2nd birthday. When he heard a commotion outside his home in Leydon, near Basildon in Essex, his family said that he went to help the homeless man who was being attacked by the youths. And a family friend said that Gibbons, a plumber, had given food to the man earlier that day. Then he was stabbed in the confrontation and died about 9:30 p.m. His family said yesterday, "We are absolutely broken beyond belief at this pointless loss, which has had a devastating effect on us all." Absolutely. Family said Gibbons, who was engaged to Vicky Billingham, his partner of 11 years, was the kind of person who would always be prepared to help anyone less fortunate than himself. Gabinap's a friend said he was a true good Samaritan for doing what he did. There is no call for it. I don't know why kids have to walk around with guns and knives. I walk around my hometown in fear. Now that is Basildon, near Basildon, Langdon. I know Langdon, I've been there. A friend laying flowers outside Gibbons' home said, he was the loveliest man, he was the best dad, he would do anything for his kids or anyone. Friends set up a GoFundMe page for Billingham and the children, which raised more than £4,500 in 14 hours. Residents said that a gang of youths had been roaming the estate drinking before Gibbons died. Remember the word estate. We shall come to that in relation to Tower Hamlets. 5 teenagers aged 13 to 16 were arrested on suspicion of murder. A 14-year-old boy has been released on bail, while 2 girls aged 15 and 16 have been released without charge. A 13-year-old boy has been released on bail over an assault. A 6th boy aged 13 was arrested on suspicion of murder and released on bail. Now this is what the disappearance of society does to the most innocent. And Johnson is in denial of society, as is the rest of the conservative cabal. Now tomorrow, Saturday, the 8th of May, we'll see the beginning of the kind of gloating by the society denying Fleet Street papers, the liars, the Daily Mail, the scum, and worst of all, the Beaverbrook poisonous legacy, the Daily Suppress. They will be gloating at whatever excuse and pretext they find to gloat, and they would equate any result marking any loss of votes by the Labour Party at any of the elections as absolute proof that Johnson is already Winston Churchill. Maybe he is above Winston Churchill in the image that they want to confect, to suit his ego. And Hartlepool has already seen the loss of the Labour candidate to the Conservative. And they will be gloating tomorrow. Today's papers were printed before the results were out. So that kind of gloating is not there, but the gloating there is at the expense of the French over Jersey. And the Times is saying something very untruthful, and we shall be questioning that. We shall be continuing to question this absolute pack of lies by the Bank of England. It says here that the Bank of England predicts strongest year economic terms, that is, since the Second World War, as Britain surges out of lockdown. There is no reason for this. There is no explanation for this, and it is absolutely untrue. The only reason is that they are lying for shoring up Boris Johnson, because there is a lot of the opposite happening in the country, in the economy, and in society, and in the rest of the world. So let's read the first paragraph. There are two names there. One is called Philip Aldrich, described as economics editor, and Gurpreet Narwan, who is obviously a Punjabi name, is described as economics correspondent. And between the two of them, the first paragraph reads, Britain is on course for its strongest year of economic growth since the Second World War, as households spend their lockdown savings and businesses step up investment, the Bank of England has said. Now we shall not go into the rest of the piece because it's absolute pack of lies. The headline is lies, and the explanation, household spending their lockdown savings, is also artificial, and it's not sustainable, and it cannot be interpreted as economic growth. Now, there is the piece about the role and the influence and the status of Keir Starmer. It says that MPs have said Starmer's team lacks punch, that is political punch, but we have said much more clearly that Keir Starmer has politically murdered the Labour Party. It's not just lacking punch. Notice the difference. And we are not 1 week ahead. We are years ahead of the Fleet Street liars. And there is this racist woman who has been involved in a racism row over dreaded Meghan jibe. And let's read the beginning of this particular one. All at the Arts Society in Truro, in Cornwall, I think, members can look forward to lectures on everything, from Renaissance paintings to the leisure pursuits of the Victorians. One topic, however, is deemed too controversial for them: the Duchess of Sussex. A lecturer has been disciplined after referring to the dreaded Meghan. Dr. Anne Anderson, who was giving a Zoom lecture on design, was also accused of using racist language when she spoke about people of a colorful disposition. She was subsequently cleared of having any racist intent. Well, this is the thing. They stage these charades and nothing happens. No accountability. Everything is fine. The lecture, entitled How We Got IKEA, Scandinavian Design 1880 to 1960, did not, on the face of it, have anything to do with the Duchess. However, it was delivered on March 12, 5 days after the Sussex's interview with Oprah Winfrey was broadcast to a worldwide audience. Before the lecture, the art historian, aged 65, who specializes in Beardsley, Klimt, and Shield, chatted to her virtual audience from her sitting room. We got into a conversation about dear Meghan, she said. She referred to her as the dreaded Meghan, and in a reference to the tide of media commentary in the interview's aftermath, observed, you couldn't turn television on without some person of a colorful disposition having a moan about something. 2 days later, Anderson, who has given about 25 Arts Society lectures each year since 1994, received an email telling her that the society had removed her from its directory of using racist language. Reading this again. Received an email telling her that the society had removed her from its directory for using racist language. 4 days later, she was told that she had to face a disciplinary panel and hand over a copy of her lecture, aware that one of her accusers was saying dreadful things, that I was this hideous racist and should be banned from the society forever. She gave them the recording. On April 15, she attended the disciplinary panel chaired by Florian Shawiza, the Art Society's 44-year-old chief executive. Also on the panel were officers of the society, including David Tyler, chairman of the Truro branch, and a woman identified only as Judy, who had made the accusation of racist language. Anderson denied using racist language. When she spoke of a colorful disposition, she said, I was referring to the language. I should have said floral language, but it just came out wrong. It is one of those things that you bitterly regret afterwards because it could have been open to misinterpretation. She also answered questions concerning about a dozen comments made by those who had attended her lecture since 2009. 3 or 4 of those lamented that she had spoken for longer than her allotted time. One alluded to anti-Americanism, and another said that before giving her lecture, she had been on the telephone. Others were highly complimentary. 4 days later, she received an email from Shawiza saying there was insufficient evidence to prove her comments were racist, but that they could be interpreted as such. They were deemed inappropriate. The panel ruled that her comments and conduct posed a serious reputational risk to the Arts Society. Shawiza said that she would not lose her accreditation to the society if she wrote letters of apology to Judy and others, attended a diversity training course, and discussed appropriate conduct with one of the society's retired lecturers. Shawiza said that the matter was resolved. Anderson said, for me, this issue is about my freedom to have an opinion, either before, during, or after a lecture. I don't want to be muzzled in case I bring the society into disrepute. Demands on her time meant that it may be a while before she could attend diversity training, she added. So I've read the whole thing. Now, what that means is that is not really dealing with racism, because the central issue she is denying, and they are accepting that she had racist intent. So that's what happens. Now we go back to the Times talking about the wealthy Asians, and it will feature, of course, Indians significantly, but not just Indians. They're talking first about Thailand. Travel agents in Thailand are offering vaccine tours to the United States, Russia, and Serbia as part of a trend in which affluent citizens of unvaccinated countries go abroad for their jabs. Unitai Trip, a Bangkok tour operator, Unitai means Thailand United or Universal, is offering packages costing from 75 to 200,000 baht, that is equivalent to 1,700 to 4,600 pounds, for vaccinations in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York. The price depends on the vaccine preferred and the length of time between the first and the second doses. Now, in other reports, not in this particular one, a lot of Indians have been reportedly leaving India to avoid the virus and also to get vaccines and other treatments. And there is a row between Angela Merkel and Joe Biden's administration about the patent on the COVID-19 vaccine. Let's see what the actual first paragraph says. Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, has spoken out against the Biden administration's proposal to waive patents on COVID-19 vaccines, saying that it would have serious implications for worldwide vaccine production. The US proposal, which has been poorly received by wealthy nations, would cause severe complications, a German government spokesman said. Patents prevent vaccines being duplicated, ensuring the makers are financially rewarded. The move would allow vaccines to be copied and distributed in the developing world. Now, that is the approach that should be preferred. But Angela Merkel is, in this case, representing the capitalists and the profiteers. And there she is making a mistake. Now, there are two items on the front page of the propaganda for Boris Johnson graph, Boris graph. One is that the end of masks in classrooms, and this will happen in a kind of retaliation by the UK government against the trade unions. Trade unions want to continue the use of masks for safety reasons, which is the preferred, socially responsible way to go. But in line with Boris Johnson's let the bodies pile up agenda, they're going to take the masks away and again leave the way open for the return of the virus. And they are continuing to promote this return of the railway children. And they've got the same thing in the Boris graph, saying that the woman killed in Pakistan asked the police for protection, and the police let her get murdered. As simple as that. And Imran Khan cannot justify that murder. And the Brexiteering fishermen are being given the platform to say that if the Jersey-like thing happened again, then the lights would go out and there would be war. So they are really gagging for war. And according to the Boris graph, some teachers are leaving the trade union over the row over the removal of the mask. And there is unfettered promotion for Boris Johnson as the victor in they've got a picture, they've got a cartoon of Johnson sitting victoriously with a fish against the French. Now there is a confession in the Boris graph that one statement made by a minister was followed by culling millions of innocent hands. Again, the business section of the paper, there is an admission, there is a piece about the European Union losing out. Well, losing, being defeated in the war that the European Union apparently had waged against the financial city of London. So the theme is that any excuse to show the Brexit is good is exaggerated and printed on the front page, like this Jersey simulated war. And the Rupert Murdoch dirty scum is overhyping it and saying that the French has been defeated over Jersey. And that is a complete lie. And this is exposed in this muzzles. But it doesn't hide the warmongering propensities. And they're overdoing the hype for an end to the lockdown. And the editorial in the scum is saying that the left is finished, and whether Labour has done as disastrously as yesterday's pre-election poll forecast should now be clear. A 10-point Tory lead looked dire for Keir Starmer. In Hartlepool and elsewhere, defeat will mean he has made no progress since Corbyn. Also, that Boris's 2019 victory would have been far bigger without the Brexit party in play. No minor reshuffle will fix Labour's woes, and so on. I mean, that is, and then there is this piece about the Jersey. And they're openly saying there is the Brexit war that has won the war against the French. With this kind of brazen stupidity being stuffed into their minds, what chance is there that ordinary people, the gullibles, will get to know the truth? And it's absolute rubbish that the scum contains. And the mail is not far behind. I mean, it can't contain its sarcasm, and it's doing the French language thing. The Great Surrender, it is calling in French. Now, there was no surrender. There was just a kind of tiff, but they won't be bothered about the accuracy or inaccuracy. And it's a picture of Johnson and his current fiancée. We say current fiancée because he's liable to ditch even Carrie Simmons if his egotistic, narcissistic selfishness requires that he ditches her. There is no word about him ditching her yet, but that can happen. And here is a complete mental slave called Nabila Ramdani. Now, Nabila Ramdani is a North African Muslim, but she is a stooge. She is a stooge of the racists, and racists give her platforms, not as often as they've been giving Yasmin Alibai C, but she is in the same mode. And the Daily Mail has found her again to have a go at Macron, and she is disguising herself as a French national. And this is like this description of war. I mean, look at that. They can't contain themselves. The Jersey fishermen's vivid account of flares, fighting talk, and armada that arrived at ramming speed. I saw a sea of red lights. It was like an invasion. And that is what the wannabe Winston Churchill, Boris Johnson, wanted to be depicted as. The only person that is actually given a platform to condemn all of it is, of course, a Labour member of the House of Peers, described as Admiral Lord West of Spithead, former First Sea Lord. And his piece is the only one that has got this sensible heading. This was childish, dangerous, and just like every other French sea skirmish, doomed to fail. But he's not condemning. He's not condemning Boris Johnson or the Daily Mail. But they're stuffed full of this victory. And they're exaggerating even more than the Daily Boris graph about the Bank or the Times, the Bank of England's prediction. And they are making it absolutely painfully unbearable. The Daily Mail. The Bank of England's economic boom, they're saying the biggest boom since 1927. It's not the biggest boom at all. It is some of the delayed spending, delayed by the lockdown. So therefore it's completely one-off. It's not a natural kind of, it's not an evidence or proof that the economy is naturally functioning at a record-breaking speed and substance. And this poisonous man called Tom Hartley is always ready and available to do a poisonous line. And he doesn't say it like Trevor Kavanagh, the crook on the Sun, the Scottish crook. He says it in a different style, so it doesn't come across as offensive as Trevor Terrible Kavanagh. But he has the same effect. If even the boss of Zoom says he's fed up with video calls, it's time we got back to the office. Now, that is a complete exaggeration. An office will never be the same again. And we shall discuss at length the reason why. Now, in the previous edition, dated yesterday, that is 6th of May, the last one, and in editions before that, I went to details about my role in disrupting hundreds of lying still Livingstone's corrupt and dishonest propaganda events and stunts, narcissistic and egotistic, that he organized starting in May 1981, that is 40 years ago. Now, I said that before any idea that anyone else would be talking about Livingstone again so soon. And here is the heading in the Daily Mail today. How Redken's loony left rabble began Labour's death spiral 40 years ago this week. Now, I said that Ken Livingstone was never a socialist, never a Democrat. But this piece about him not only says that he was a socialist, but it says that he was an extreme socialist. He never was. And that is my exclusive revelation, which I've been making consistently for 40 years. And here, the writer is Leo McKinstry. Now, McKinstry is a turncoat, an opportunistic turncoat, because he was employed by Harriet Hattie Harman as her advisor. So therefore he was praising a Labour kind of regime. Now he is against Labour. And what he's saying here is that it was 40 years ago that Livingstone was elected GLC leader, sparking the divisive identity politics, blighting Britain and his party today. Now that is absolute lies. Leo McKinstry was nowhere near the GLC. I was there, as I said, every day, every week, if not every day, at the county hall for 4 or 5 years, every day, every week. The only time I wasn't there was when there was a holiday or break or something, or I had an emergency appointment somewhere else. So this is the difference between what I offer and what I exclusively offer worldwide, world exclusive. Now this guy is a jobbing writer, and he's exaggerating Ken Livingstone's politics and substance completely untruthfully, and is linking Ken Lyons to Livingstone to a fantasy movement against racism. There was no movement against racism by the GLC, most certainly not by Ken Lyons to Livingstone. Lyons to Livingstone has always made a career by lying. And as I said, I had face-to-face confrontations and exchanges with him lasting, going over 4 years. Not every single day, but I had over those periods. And McKinstry is absolutely lying, even by comparing Sadiq Khan with the GLC and including references to Linda Bellows, the leader of Lambeth Council, who allegedly said, and this is within a quote, that Margaret Thatcher's government was wanting to build gas chambers for lesbians, gay men, and blacks and socialists. Now, if Bellows said that, that is something that I cannot access at this minute. But even if she said that, that was nothing to do with there being a movement for identity politics. There was nothing to do with that, because it was Bellows's own ignorance and idiocy and corruption and dishonesty. And I had more evidence about Bellows's stupidity while she was in post as the lesbian who was leader of Lambeth Council. She was given extremely unjustified platforms, and she never represented a movement against racism. As this quote, which I have only read, I have not been able to verify, says, she was talking about lesbians and gay men. She was not talking about the black community. And in the piece that Leo McKinstry has written for the Daily Mail, it says, and just like today, now he's lying. This paragraph is complete lies. The police got it in the neck from the tin pot revolutionaries. There are no revolutionaries of any description in Britain. There never has been. There never have been. And there is no evidence that the so-called revolutionaries have ever had genuine, substantial, evidence-based criticism of the police, let alone beating them about politically. The police powers in Britain and the record of the police behavior come very near the police powers and the record of a dictatorship. Whether that can be compared to the Nazi era police in Germany is subject to the evidence and item by item comparison. But the police in this country have been authoritarian increasingly. And nothing Linda Bella said or did amounted to identifying the actual wrongs and failures and failings and the corruption and dishonesty that are allowed to be carried out by the police under the cover of policing. So therefore, there is no need to give police any more powers than they already have. But Johnson is going to give them more powers. And there is no justification. And this phrase, police got it in the neck, is a criminally conceived, sophisticated piece of lie that paints the police as the victims. That is absolutely the opposite of what is happening. And it is citing the Metropolitan Police estimate that the GLC's 3.5 million annual police committee budget, it was mostly spent on funding anti-police activity. That's the biggest pack of lies in that piece about the policing. The police committee didn't do any anti-police activity at all. Because if it did do anti-police activity, then it must have done it in the dark, in secret. Nobody knew. And a look at the police behavior and arrests and so on during the years that he's talking about would show that the police were behaving without any accountability. The police committee was completely dysfunctional in doing what the Daily Mail is saying it did. And the police committee had employees that have had corrupt careers and have sabotaged and undermined anti-racist activities and activists throughout that period and through the funding and through their agenda. And this criminal is saying a lot of other things in that piece that are complete lies. So we shall be diagnosing item by item that whole piece, that lying piece, in due course. And it's nothing to do with Ken lying to Livingstone. If anything, the crisis of the Labour Party, if it is to be linked with whatever Ken Livingstone did, the crisis in the Labour Party is in the fact that the GLC was corrupt and funded crooks and allowed Livingstone to have his ego and sidelined the real activists and campaigners in the country, in the community. And there is another piece here on page 26 of the Daily Mail that is bringing back references to the Batley School, Charlie Hebdo, Rao. It says that new school storm over picture of Muhammad. Primary teacher showed image in assembly to celebrate Prophet's birthday and even got date wrong. Now, of course, there is no picture to be shown of the Prophet. So anyone who says they're showing a picture to children of the Prophet is asking for trouble. And there is a report here that has got the highlight saying that 114 teens killed since Sadiq Khan became mayor. Now, there is no way that they can say that these murders were caused by Sadiq Khan being the mayor. They should first of all say how many were killed during Boris Johnson 8 years as the incumbent in the post of mayor at the expense of London. And they should say the same thing about Ken Livingstone when he was in post for 8 years. And they've got another Khan here who is described as a gynecologist who groped a doctor's breasts, obviously white woman doctor, Dr. Jane Gunter. A gynecologist, unmasked as a groper by a colleague, has been allowed to treat patients again after insisting he has learned how to control himself around women. Professor Khalid Khan, 55, one of Britain's leading women's health experts, was suspended for 12 months after Dr. Jane Gunter went public with accusations that he fondled her breasts like an octopus while they were attending a medical conference. Now, this is a kind of behavior that brings disrepute to society on various levels. And this man should not have been allowed to return to work. He should have been prosecuted for violence against this woman doctor. And the fact that he has not been prosecuted is not an isolated event. So we shall be talking more about the lies in Fleet Street, lies by Fleet Street, shall be going back to the Financial Times. Now, this is the Financial Times claiming that the Bank of England forecasting fastest growth rate in 70 years as economy rebounds. That is absolutely untrue. Because the next big item on the front page of the same Financial Times is Rio Tinto suffers big investor rebellion amid bruising day for the UK listed groups. That is the reality. Now, this is a piece from India, New Delhi, by this woman called Amy Kazmin. So the Kazmin sounds like an Asian-related name, but it could be somewhere else that it is derived from. But she's clearly a Western-oriented person. As a foreign correspondent, my job is to tell India's stories, not be part of them. But when I started feeling feverish while writing an article about COVID-19 vaccine policy last month, I had a gut feeling that the SARS-CoV-2 virus had found me. I hoped it was exhaustion that I'd sleep off, but the next day, still feverish, I was asked to take a COVID test. A leading diagnostic laboratory chain, which earlier had run an efficient home testing service, had stopped answering its phones and responding to online requests. But a doctor friend persuaded one of its laboratories specialists to collect my sample. 2 days later, the results confirmed I was part of the ferocious coronavirus wave, battering India and pushing its healthcare system to breaking point. Well, she's written the whole piece about herself. So I'm not going to read the whole piece, except to read the last bit that relates to the country, not to herself. And with thousands dying daily, often for want of medical help, the health minister, that is India's health minister, was callously citing dubious official data to claim India's COVID fatality rate was lower than richer countries. Hardly consolation to grief-stricken families. Today I have recovered from my encounter with the virus. It will take far longer to get over the trauma of watching this calamity engulf the place I call home. Well, she has written a bourgeois piece, and it is as untruthful about the whole country as are the claims by the minister and Modi and others in the regime. So the description of financial crimes doesn't alter because of her piece. Because the heading, harrowing brush with COVID as India is ravaged. She does not describe any harrowing experience, although the heading says that it does. So what I have tweeted about this piece by Amy Kazmin is that a misleading heading and a bourgeois account underneath it does not tell the truth of the tsunami of the pandemic that was recharged by Modi and his cabal. And this tweet thread will continue. Now, here is the piece that the Financial Times is running today about Facebook. And the heading is, "Don't leave framing free expression to Facebook's Supreme Court." And it's ending. It is a piece under technology by John Thornhill. And the last paragraph says, "There are no simple answers to questions of free expression online, but that does not mean attempts to find more complex answers are futile. What we should not do is allow Facebook to frame these issues for all of us for its own corporate convenience." Now that is absolutely true. But the Financial Times doesn't run their agenda to tell the truth about corporate convenience. The Financial Times colludes and has been complicit with corporate convenience. And the editorial, first of two, editorials in today's Financial Times is headed, "The UK and the EU must find a new equilibrium." Now that is, of course, a sensible kind of statement. But given the Jersey stunt by the rest of Fleet Street, equilibrium is not only not in the minds of the liars that edit and decide the policies of the majority of Fleet Street, but they will obstruct an equilibrium. They want the fever of hostility, antagonism to get worse. And the pharma industry is starting to attack Biden, because Biden is trying to make the virus medicine available to wider people than the pharma wants, which is what the other item in the other paper about Angela Merkel and her administration being already in dispute with Biden over the circulation and the availability of the drugs. And this is the piece in the Financial Crimes that at least relates to the ravage that India is going through, but not just India, but rest of Asia as well. But because of the demography, the size of the population in India, and by extension the size of its economy, India gets mentioned more often than the other Asian countries. But the heading is correct. It says Pandemic Economic Outlook. Virus stalks Asia as West gears up for rebound. The gear up as boasted up by the Bank of England and the Brexiteering Fleet Street. And there is a piece on the same page 8, by Edward Luce, who correctly says that Trump is destroying the traditional outlook of the conservatives in the USA. And there is a highlight of that situation summed up in this particular part of the statement. No Republican in the USA, that is, with ambition, that is to become either a senator or a congressman or governor or whatever, can afford to contradict the overlord of Mar-a-Lago. Overlord of Mar-a-Lago, of course, is a reference to the liar Donald Trump, who is destroying the Republican Party and the much of America. Now, India, hit by severe wave and case remain high in Thailand, Indonesia, and Philippines. Now, this piece is not referring to Pakistan or Bangladesh, two of the immediate neighbors to India, and the British media has not referred to either Pakistan or Bangladesh and has not covered the impact either country is having based on the resurgence on a tsunami level of the COVID-19 in India. So therefore, the media is irresponsibly neglecting hundreds of millions of people. Between Bangladesh and Pakistan, almost 500,000 people. So it's not a small number of people, it's huge. And the demographic implication and impact of this negligence and bias would be felt by the West eventually. So Robin Harding in Tokyo, who is saying, and we just read one bit of it, because it's a long piece, and we shall get a few paragraphs in. Throughout 2020, Asia's success in controlling COVID-19 made it the champion of the world economy. While Europe and the US were mired in recessions, much of Asia escaped with a shallower downturn or even kept growing. But as Western economies gear up for a vaccine-led rebound that is set to take output back to pre-pandemic levels by the end of this year, parts of Asia are still in the grip of coronavirus. As such, although the region's output is already above its pre-pandemic level, slower growth is expected in coming months. So is then kind of retailing the position given to it by the Asian Development Bank. The ADB projected growth of 5.6% across developing Asian economies in 2021, led by growth of 8.1% in China and 11% in India. But the continued threat of coronavirus means risks to that outlook are skewed to the downside. 6 months ago or 8 months ago, I would have said Asia is going to be ahead of the game because Asia can control COVID, said Steve Cochran, chief APAC economist at Moody's Analytics in Singapore. But the picture has changed, with India suffering a severe wave of the virus and cases still high in countries such as Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand, which has been unable to reopen its crucial tourist industry, that is Thailand. And it's connecting the gloomy outlook and comparing it with the reaction that would have happened without the virus in relation to Joe Biden's stimulus measures. Now, why they are not referring to Pakistan and Bangladesh is indeed significant, and we shall be examining the reasons why. We need to do further checks on the situation both in Pakistan and Bangladesh as to why the Indian resurgence of the virus is not being related to these two countries, which have got between them almost 500,000 people. And here is a similar piece in the Financial Times or Crimes about the big read about travel. Devastated by the fall-off in business, some countries in southern Europe are looking to use Brussels recovery funds to move away from the mass market. But can they afford to do that? Now, as I said, the boasted of prediction by the Bank of England that England and Britain, the British economy, would witness a rebound, a surge, first time of its volume and magnitude for 70 years is wrong, because everything, including travel is a big part of the economic activity that they measure and the financial activities. And both of those are going in the negative way. The only thing they are showing as positive in a prediction is that the British public will spend the money that they couldn't spend during the lockdown. Now, that's not normal behavior, and that will not be sustainable. So, the prediction, the claim, the boast, the bragging that the British economy would experience a surge, an upward kind of movement that has not been seen for 70 years is wrong, not founded. It is unfounded, absolute rubbish. And it is motivated by the same agenda, the same intention, which dominates the Fleet Street lying papers, Brexiteering, warmongers. They are exaggerating the Jersey blockade by France and the so-called retreat by France. They are saying, as a result of the Brexiteering dispatch of British gunboats to Jersey by Johnson. This is completely, absolutely untruthful and exaggerated and misleading. So we shall be looking at the economics from the standpoint of we said the Financial Times is not telling the truth because it is committing propaganda for the financial criminals, because it doesn't cover as a norm, as an ordinary list of main things that the Financial Times covers, reports, and examines. It doesn't even recognize the existence of at least 1/3 of the population of the UK. So whatever the population currently, what is the population now? So it says in 2019, the population was 66.65 million. And it's the data is dated in 2019, the main ones. 19 and previous to that, 2000 kind of 18. And the population in the UK is 55.98 million. That is based on 2018. So most of the people are in England. What's the population of Germany? The Germany's population 2019 is 83.2 million. And Spain, let's see how many. Spain's population 46.94 million, 2019. And what is the population of France? It's 67.06 million, 2019. Now that's only a difference of about 2 million. So when they leave out in the Financial Times the impact on Bangladesh and on Pakistan, two of the demographically and geographically biggest, two of India's biggest neighbors. I mean, the other neighbor on the other side, northeast, is of course China. But China is not as close geographically, physically, and in other respects, culturally, and so many other things, to India as Bangladesh and Pakistan are. And the contacts, despite the various restrictions and limitations and hostilities between India and Pakistan, there are more contacts between these countries, natural contracts, geographical contracts between India and Pakistan, and on the other side, India and Bangladesh. So the impact of the current tsunami, of the surge on the one hand, and the lack of medical care for the majority of the victims in India will be bound to be felt in a very serious way in both countries, India's both neighbors, Pakistan and Bangladesh. China has got various borders, various geographical borders, and kind of differences and gaps and distances between India and China mainland because of mountains and because of other natural kind of barriers. So the immediate impact of India's resurgent virus will have less impact on China than it will have, or it has been having, on Bangladesh and Pakistan. And yet the Fleet Street media don't mention either Pakistan or Bangladesh. Why don't they do that? Because in physical terms, in economic terms, in social terms, both Bangladesh and Pakistan have got, as I said, between them almost 500,000 people, which is far more people than all of Western Europe put together. As I said, I mean, the population of China is the exception, but the population of Germany, 83 million, the population of the United Kingdom, nearly 70 million, 150 million, 52 million, and then Spain and France making another, let's say, 140 million or something. Still not even the same population of India. Well, India cannot be matched, but Pakistan and Bangladesh. So more people in Pakistan and Bangladesh are already being impacted on by the resurgent infection and also the poor level of care that India is providing to the people, Indian people victimized and in desperate need of emergency help and care. Amy Kazmin, writing from Delhi, has written a bourgeois piece. It hasn't actually represented the experience of people that are in the masses, are dying and are being infected, being neglected, and being lied about and are being misreported in terms of the under-reporting or under kind of statement of the numbers affected in every level. Infections, neglect, and deaths. And it doesn't even begin to talk about the discrimination which are being suffered by hundreds of millions of people in India. And it doesn't talk about the flight of the wealthy Indians to countries abroad for access to care and access to COVID-free environments. The elections that took place in London yesterday, we say London because the London Assembly had elections, and the mayor, of course, the mayor at the expense of London had the election. And in the case of Tower Hamlets in East London, there was this referendum about the corrupt system of mayor, whether they should be kept or should be replaced. And the same thing happened with the electors of Newham. And both Newham and Tower Hamlets, they have on their websites the statement that the results of these elections will be known on the 8th of May, which is tomorrow, Saturday. What time that will be remains to be seen, of course. And there is no indication as to how the people voted in the part that is the referendum, which is about the future of the elected mayor post. And we cannot access anything on the internet so far anyway that is in any way reliable. But let me say this, whatever the result in either borough, Newham and Tower Hamlets, about how the council should be kind of constituted in terms of how the council operates, whether by the corrupt system being retained or by a theoretically democratic accountable alternative. Whatever the people have actually voted for in Tower Hamlets and in Newham, that vote, whatever the result, will not deliver to the people the democracy, the service, the quality, the accountability. For that to happen, the delivery of the quality of service, accountability by Newham Council, by Tower Hamlets Council, dedicated, transparent, and actual campaigns will have to be mounted to secure that. For example, in the literature that the voters were sent in the last 2 or 3 days before the 6th of May voting, the literature does not focus on the urgency of having democracy and democratic accountability. That is very dangerous. Whoever wrote those leaflets clearly was writing in denial of the vital need and necessity for local councils to deliver democracy, accountability. And there is no mention in the several leaflets, separate leaflets that have been distributed. There is no mention about the corruption of the council, regardless of whether it is lumbered with an elected mayor corruption, regardless of the form. Every council is corrupt by definition, because there is no forum for accountability, holding the local council to any standard of rigorous accountability, answerability. Why does it matter? Because thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, in London, there are 8 to 9 million people. We shall check the London population as well. 8 million plus people live in London, and all of them live in London boroughs. The London mayor, or the mayor at the expense of London, actually doesn't relate to the services that are the duties of the councils to deliver. So all these councils are allowed to do as they please, because there is no actual forum for day-to-day or week-to-week or month-to-month or annual operation of the accountability audit demand on the council in each of the 32 boroughs, or each of the 32 borough equivalents, because of the City of London, which is not a borough in the same size as the 31 boroughs. But 31 boroughs is enough. And in none of the 31 boroughs in London is there anything, any forum, any device, or any legal or legally enforced say by the voters or on behalf of the voters in each of the boroughs to hold the council accountable, answerable for its duties out to the individuals on the cases and generally to the community on the policies. And there is no access to actual judicial service. That is to say, the corrupt English judiciary at any level, county court level, crown court level, high court level, or the court of appeal level, or the Supreme Court level. None of these courts, they exist, but none of these is available to the electors and ordinary people in the boroughs to even seek remedies against the wrongdoings and the negligence and the corruption, incompetence, illegality, and prejudice and backwardness and failures by and through these councils. And the so-called local government ombudsman is in itself a corruption and a criminality. It is not a place to seek redress through. It is a corruption and criminality that is an insult to the concept of the watchdog or ombudsman. So, what happens whether the corrupt post of the mayor is retained or not? Ordinary people whose rights the council must uphold in various areas, everything to do with local services, everything to do with the local safeguarding. Remember the children, the 4 girls that Tower Hamlets Council neglected and is still neglecting. And by structural kind of exchanges and partnership and local kind of connections, although the council is not the police force, it has got significant duties to make sure that the police based in the borough, in each borough, are doing their job properly. The fact that that is the case is not automatically delivered. And the reason why we need to have active and real transparent campaigns for highest standard, the highest standards of policing in each borough, especially in this context, in the context of this discussion, the two boroughs of Tower Hamlets and Newham will have to be sought. The actual delivery of the highest standard of policing must be aimed to be achieved by campaigning activities, and no councillor will be doing the campaign. Whatever the form, whether the corrupt system of mayor, elected mayor, remains in place or not. By definition, every councillor, once they are elected or once they are in place as elected councillor, wrongly but actually has this feeling that they are above the level of legitimacy that is available to each ordinary person who is not a councillor. So they think they are above because they are councillors. That is absolutely created because of the lack of activities, putting the councillors in the place of being answerable. Because they are not being put in the place of being answerable, they can fantasize. And that fantasy becomes real. And they actually believe that they are above the ordinary voters until the next election. So this will be the case even if the mayor system is rejected. We shall have to find out tomorrow. But whatever the result, the councillors will have to be the main target for democratic answerability and accountability. Councillors are in place, and whether they are held to account or not, they are paid the money that ordinary people are not paid for not doing anything. And one of the things that the councillors have been able to get away with is that they publish the so-called record, and they say that they have been doing councillor jobs for so many hours. But there is no accountability for that. There is no actual audit. I mean, as happened in the time during the period of Lutfur Rahman, while he was in post as mayor. One of his supporters, a councillor, was found to have lied about the numbers of hours they had spent in councillor jobs or councillor work. Why is that important? Because by exaggerating and making up a number of hours, sometimes 30 hours, 40 hours, 50 hours, whatever the number of hours each week or each month, once accepted by the council's in-house bureaucracy, those hours are rewarded by the councillors getting their allowances, whatever the other details and other payments are. So those hours are the basis of the claim that they have been doing the work. And it has never been open to scrutiny by ordinary people in the community. That has to be established as a real dynamic process. The other thing is that the council's budget, the annual budget and the annual kind of expenditure, the financial reports, they are not available online. Why not? Access to the financial report, annual report and budget is such an obstructive, obstacle-filled nightmare that most people, most voters cannot go through that without suffering serious depression and stress. And they haven't got the time or the resources available to spend in looking for the very secret financial reports. That is absolutely corrupt, built-in corruption. And that has to be changed. Because only by looking at the actual evidence of the amount spent on various things can the voter begin to see where the right decisions were made and where the wrong decisions are made, and why there should be change from the wrong to the right. And that cannot be done if the evidence of the decisions made is kept away from the ordinary voters and members of the public. The findings of the auditors, Price Waterhouse Cooper, against the corrupt regime of Luther Rahman have enough information, they haven't got all the information, but they have enough information on what Luther Rahman's corrupt regime did with a lot of money that belonged to the community, belonged to the council. There is enough evidence in that report of how corruption can become the norm, while externally maintaining the appearance that there is no corruption. How does these two contradictory things take place at the same time? Because of lack of access, because the public cannot see the details of expenditure and the details of the decision-making events about the expenditure. Because people in the community alone know what is going on in the community. If there is any service being provided to the community at large, rather than a secret cabal of crooks being funded by the council, but the crooks cabal is not available publicly. It doesn't operate publicly, it doesn't serve the community publicly. That is what a lot of Luther Rahman's connections kind of were engaged in, with the Luther Rahman directly being the decision maker. And although there were around 50 councillors in place, none of the councillors had any access to any of these decisions or any of the pre-decision making conversations or communications or exchanges. Similarly, when this very seriously trapped and in danger, at risk woman, a resident of Tower Hamlets, was trapped in Bangladesh for 15 years, during which she was violated, she was beaten up, she was mistreated, she was starved, she was malnourished, and Lutfur Rahman refused all communications about the council duty to help her and to help her return to her home in Tower Hamlets. He did that because there was no ongoing democratic facility or process in place in the council to hold him to account for that criminal series of negligence that he perpetrated about that woman over the entirety of his time in incumbence in the post of the corrupt mayor. Because the woman was tricked away from London in May, this is the month May 2001, and she was in that position throughout 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 14, up to 23rd of April 2015 and beyond, until she passed away. And she had been in the position, same position, prior to October 2010 when Lutfur Rahman became the incumbent in that corrupt post. So she was being violated, mistreated, and starved and deprived and robbed and looted, robbed of her passport from May 2001 up to October 2010. So that is 9 years. Now all of that happened with more than one person being aware of the woman's position and more than one communication being made to the council. During the period before there was a mayor post, and during the period since the mayor post was started in October 2010. In neither form of the council did the basic duties owed to that woman by the council, the duty was not done. In fact, several employees in Tower Hamlets Council lied. Several employees in Tower Hamlets Council deliberately, intentionally lied and obstructed communications that were both legal and detailed updates on the state of that woman at every stage. And there was not a single member of the Tower Hamlets Council's so-called social services, which is what was the front line, if you like, section of the council, which owed the duty to that woman. So to this day, there is no evidence that Tower Hamlets Council, whether the occupant of the corrupt post of mayor or the personnel in post in the name of social services or anyone in posts in the legal section or the monitoring officer, all of whom had been made aware extensively of the details of the various risks and dangers that this woman was in, and the violations that she was suffering and being caused, and the utmost urgency that existed for her to be helped to return home to London. So all of these were obstructed and denied by the liars, including Lutfur Rahman, because Lutfur Rahman was told to take action on the very serious failings and failures and dangerous lies being perpetrated by Tower Hamlets Council. The fact that Lutfur Rahman chose not to do anything meant that Lutfur Rahman was complicit in the series of crimes committed by Tower Hamlets Council over 6 calendar years. So when Lutfur Rahman says that he was not found guilty because he was not prosecuted by the Metropolitan Police, he lies. Because he makes a general statement of denial that does not admit the existence of that case, and by extrapolation, the existence of the cases of the 4 Bethnal Green schoolgirls, and by additional evidential extrapolation, the existence of thousands of other cases. The Tower Hamlets Council regime, that is the employees as well as the mayor himself, were guilty of neglecting, and nobody has been mentioned in his denial. So therefore, he cannot be said to have addressed all these detailed, individual, named, nameable, identifiable cases. So when the council is got rid of, if you like, or freed or liberated from the corrupting post of elected mayor, the task is not to celebrate, saying that the mayor system is no longer there. The task is to start the overdue investigation into all these cases. That is one hand. And the other is to make sure that day to day, every single employee of the council is doing their job appropriately, not being allowed to behave on the assumption that they are doing their job. There has to be a parallel investigation, dynamic investigation taking place every single day. That is the least that needs to be done. That is the least that can be done and should be done in order to make sure that Tower Hamlets, as the council with now anything between 1 and 1.5 billion or more money at its disposal to do the services that it exists in a funded capacity to provide, is doing the services. The fact that after 5 years of being banned, Lutfur Rahman can have the audacity to make the kind of denial statement shows that he has no remorse, no shame, no sense of responsibility to the people whose lives he has been complicit in getting destroyed by the council. How do you evaluate in terms of money how much damages would compensate, or how much compensation, how much would be enough to compensate the victims of Tower Hamlets Council's Lutfur Rahman's negligence? You cannot begin to put a monetary term to somebody's entire life being destroyed, or somebody, or these four girls, as we have been saying. One of the girls, Sharmina Begum, not Shamima Begum. Sharmina Begum was the one that has been named as having been brainwashed from East London Mosque by two women described as the Sisters Forum. Now this is public record. Public record only comparatively recent, but it is on the public domain or domains. Any council, any entity, any organization with more than £1 billion at its disposal as the local council, as the provider of local services, should have immediately acted to safeguard these girls, and it didn't. Now, I can say to you that there is no exemption. In constitutional law, there is a phrase or a word or a term or a concept called derogation. In the context of constitutional law, the term and the concept of derogation refers to exemption from certain tasks and duties and obligations. So, for example, termless council can only say that it didn't do anything to help these girls if it can show evidence that even before they were brainwashed by these two sisters forum women based at the East London Mosque, these girls were already a threat. And that threat was independently verifiable, and the independent verification of that threat, or the independent verification of the existence of that threat, entitled Termless Council to treat these children as being outside of the duty of safeguarding children that the Termless Council would have owed them. That's the only kind of evidence that would justify Termless Council seeking to excuse its serious, dangerous failures by citing its right under derogation. But it didn't, because there is no such ground, there is no such evidence. Other scope, occasions, instances of derogation refer to national security over various things like the habeas corpus and other things. But there is no evidence for any of those. And the reason why there is no evidence is because Termless Council is the guilty party in here. Every case of negligence, every case of collaboration and collusion by Lutfur Rahman with the crooks in posts has been a corrupt, criminal, dishonest act, illegal act, unlawful act. Why we are talking about Lutfur Rahman? Because by talking about Lutfur Rahman's role, we are also talking about John Biggs's role, because Lutfur Rahman did the wrongs for a longer period than John Biggs did, but the same wrongfulness is found in the behavior of both Lutfur Rahman and John Biggs. So what we are covering is the unfitness and unsuitability of the corrupt post of elected mayor for the borough. But the removal of that post, this is the point I'm making very clear before the results are out tomorrow. The removal of that post does not automatically restore to the community the benefits of the services and the quality of the services and the accountability. So we have to make sure that we do set up the campaign to have that kind of service delivered to the community. The role that John Biggs played in 2018 in aiding and abetting and colluding with the crooks of the Harka corrupt organization about their plot against the crisp street market and community is typical of the corrupt behavior by a corrupt holder of the corrupt post of the elected mayor. I made public at least 100 separate statements detailing the incidents and the details of the corruption and the illegality and anti-democracy, anti-social role played by John Biggs. And I asked the councillors to support the campaign to stop the Harka attacks on the crisp street market and community. Not a single councillor came forward. Now these included some councillors who had personally promised to support the campaign to stop Harka interfering and attacking. Those promises are made before the election, at which some of these councillors were elected councillor for the first time in May 2018. And once they got in as councillors, they disappeared, like somebody had killed them politically. And that happened because they stopped talking about crisp street market in the way that they had promised they would be doing after the election. So the move by Popular Harka was approved by the Tower Hamlets Crooked Council and with the collusion of these liars who became councillors. So therefore, we have evidence of councillors lying as well as the mayors lying. So even if the mayor system is removed and councillors are given a say that we have been asking for, it cannot follow that these councillors will be telling the truth. And the only way to make the council or councillors behave in accordance with their duties is by campaigning, putting them under clear pressure. And we say in the context of the campaign against the Crossrail, whole plot against Brick Lane, that the only way that the council would behave in defense, in support of the service that it owed to the community is if the councillors are put under direct pressure, that they would lose their position if they didn't support the community. That is obviously something that should have been automatically available. But the reality is that the council is by definition a corrupt organization if it has no active democratic process overseeing, overlooking every relevant decision or decision-making process that it undertakes. And councillors are the ones who give the go-ahead. If it is a council and leader-based constitution, then it will be councillors who will be having an express say and position. They have to approve or disapprove. And we have to demand as a community that they stop approving anything that is against the community, and that they don't listen to unaccountable employees in the council. They don't listen to unaccountable agencies from anywhere else that has got any link or links with the council. At the same time that we do that, we have also to stop the corrupt gangs called the trade union leaders from colluding with the corrupt decision makers inside the council. While trade union membership is okay, trade unions leaders must not be allowed to become the new mayors by putting the trade unions' weight on the new format of the council at the expense of the community. And any number of legal, lawful, legitimate action, transparent action that can be taken to keep the council, because the council will then have three components. One is the elected councillors, including the leader, and all the councillors, whether they're in the controlling group or not, all the elected councillors in place at any given time. That is one section. The other is the trade unions. The trade unions leaders have always operated in secrecy. We have to make it abundantly clear that trade unions cannot make secret communications that may refer to the welfare and the needs of the community. That is a distinction between the legitimate right of the trade unions to communicate about their terms and conditions, but they cannot neutralize or deny or violate the rights of the community. That is a different matter altogether, and that cannot be subordinated. The rights of the community and the people that the council owes service and duties to cannot be made secondary to whatever terms and conditions negotiations trade union leaders embark on or engage in. And then there are the permanent employees of the council, and those include the contractors and agencies. So all of those will have to be monitored and held answerable and accountable. On the basis of their duties, the council's collective as a whole, as an entity, duties owed to the electors and the community and the people in need. I think I have given a very clear statement in anticipation of whatever the result is tomorrow. I say that without saying that we have won or whatever, because of what happened in Tower Hamlets in 2010. Despite the fact that there was an apparent campaign against the elected mayor system, the crooks betrayed the community and lumbered the community for 10 years with the corrupt, crooked post of elected mayor. And they disappeared democracy altogether. I mean, I can say I hope that this has not happened again yesterday, but I cannot say confidently that this hasn't, because the votes have been cast by people in their thousands in secret. So until the result is out, I cannot be sure as to which way they voted. But as I said, because I am not sure, we cannot be relying on the goodwill, automatic goodwill. We have to do the work to get the services, to get the accountability. So I'm not complacent at all. And I'd urge any and every genuine supporter of a democracy and honest, accountable, answerable council to join me and to continue in their own way where that is possible, to put the pressure, real pressure, on councillors to deliver a democratic council. Whether there is going to be a continuation of the mayor system, councillors cannot claim the legal immunity or impunity from accountability from now on. We shall be continuing looking at other issues and other titles and topics in the next part and parts. This is coming to an end, this particular one, just after 12:15 local time and 12:17 hours GMT on Friday, the 7th of May 2021. We shall be continuing in the next parts, of course, in the following hours.